there have been increasingly far more musicians coming out against kind of woke culture and cancel culture and that sort of thing. And I know there have been lots of cases of people being cancelled, but I would like to focus on the people that are so-called uncancellables and that sort of thing, because I think people despair way too much about the state of culture, and they think that, oh my God, everything is going badly. There's no way that we can reclaim kind of music, art, film, TV, but there's still lots of people out there who have kind of stayed until now very quiet, but they're starting to come out, and starting with Roger Daltrey of The Who. And we've got a good dispatch here from Rory where he covers this. And recently, Roger Daltrey of The Who, who, if you don't know The Who, big band kind of in the late 60s, got some good songs. Some of my favourites, My Generation, The Seeker, great ones. Not such a fan of the stuff post-70s, but...
I mean, just going into this, like, I don't know any of the musicians, because I'm terrible at music, so...
I've been a musician for like 10 years, so this is something close to my heart.
Yeah.
And it's good to see some people I respect and some that I don't as well.
But this sort of world has definitely been seen as sort of a leftist space that's been given up, same with like Hollywood in the US, for example.
Yeah, and I don't want people to kind of catastrophize it, because it's really not the case, and a lot of the kind of rebellious music genres are still very much in that same vein, and there's been lots of emphasis on creativity in music, not following kind of social pressures and social norms, and I don't think this is really going to change. I think people care about their artistry more than they care about being politically correct, and I think this is going to continue, although it might be a bit more underground. I think that's more to do with popular music just being more of a commodity rather than an art form, and a lot of the chart music, I know most people don't really listen to that, and everyone knows that you don't really listen to what is popular anymore because it's just to make money. There's no artistry there, and you've got the things like the familiarity effect where it's just manufactured to sound very similar to pre-existing stuff to make the most money. So that's the antithesis of being creative. But nevertheless, that's a bit of a tangent, but I felt like that I needed to get that out there. So anyway, back to Roger Daltrey. He recently had an interview on BBC Radio 1, and he talked about the golden era of music, which I very much agree, which is kind of the late 60s to the mid-70s. And he was saying that nowadays there's not really much way to disseminate truth because of the state of the media. I'm going to read a quote here. He says, "It's almost like now we have to turn the whole thing off, go back to newsprint, go back to the word of mouth and start reading books again. I don't know, we might get somewhere because it's becoming so absurd now with AI, all the tricks it can do." So I think he's trying to complain here about kind of algorithms, but in a very kind of Luddite way, just like reject the internet entirely.
Return to monkey.
Yeah, he may as well be saying that. Let's go live in the woods, forget about, the spoken word. But no. So he explicitly mentioned the woke generation and having some kind of compulsion to create a miserable world for everyone, including themselves, which I think is fair enough. I think they certainly don't seem like happy people, do they? These people that are supposedly the morally upstanding folks that they claim to be, they're always very miserable, and you can see it just in their faces. Like a great place to look is like Andy knows screenshots of all the Antifa people, and it's like spot the happy person.
I mean, people living stellar lives.
So he says anyone who's lived life and you see what they're doing, you just know that it's a route to nowhere. And he says that growing up in post-war Britain and living through socialist governments and the failure of communism in the Soviet Union, I've been to communist countries where they were actually communist, and I've seen how wonderful it really is. So he's saying that he's seen what they want and it's awful, and I think he's just calling them naive here, which is surprisingly, accurate as far as it goes. For
a bit tepid, but pretty good.
He is 77 years old now, so
yeah,
I mean,
fair enough.
He's probably stopped caring a little bit with the current goings on, so you can't really blame him for not having his finger on the pulse with everything that's going on. And then the next person who came out was Glenn Danzig of The Misfits. This isn't someone I'm very familiar with, unlike The Who. So he said that cancel culture has basically prevented lots of great art, and he's saying that in the past, lots of things wouldn't have been created if there was the same atmosphere today, and that it's holding artistry back. He says, people don't understand because everything's so cancel culture, woke BS nowadays, but you never have the punk explosion nowadays because of cancel culture, woke BS. He just repeated himself. You can never have it. It would never have happened. We're lucky it happened when it did because it will never happen again. So he's pretty black-pilled on this. He's saying that, you know, our time for good artistry is over, but then he's a punk, so he's not going to be optimistic like, oh, it's all going to be great.
It's good to see though that the old rebels are just like, yeah, the woke retards are the worst thing on the planet.
Yeah, and it's not even like a kind of a
because
certain genre. It's just a cross-genre thing where there's lots of different people agreeing on the same things, whereas otherwise they never would have agreed with one another and probably disliked each other at the time.
But I mean, in the way that, you know, the woke types represent themselves as like, we're the resistance, we're fighting the system or whatever, and it's like, no, you're the most manufactured movement that the world has ever seen. Like, you came out of academia, you're endlessly funded, you're endlessly promoted by every, you know, governmental organization and company out there. You know, BS.
I've got a quote that's almost exactly that, but I don't want to spoil it.
Okay.
So moving on to Johnny Rotten of the Sex Pistols, he's come out with some hilarious stuff, and the fact that this kind of guy, if you see a picture of him...
like, for people who are listening, he looks kind of deranged in the photo they've used.
I have an even funnier photo as well from when he was younger. It's a bit more charitable, but not much, really. Like, they used to go on stage in bin bags and stuff like that. Like, they're not known for being highbrow. But nevertheless, he recently had an interview where he condemned wokeness and cancel culture, and... I think he has a bit of an agenda in being against cancel culture, because I think it was around the 70s, they released God Save the Queen. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that song, but basically it was a song against the monarchy, and it was released during Queen Elizabeth II's Silver Jubilee, so 25 years as Queen, and both the BBC and the Independent Broadcasting Authority refused to play the song at all, even though it was number 1 in the NME charts. And number 2 in the UK charts. And just to read some of the lyrics, because why not? He says stuff like, God save the Queen, the fascist regime, and then another one, God save the Queen, she ain't no human being, there's no future, and England's dreaming. So he's not exactly tepid. He's not holding back, and this was kind of mid-70s.
It's not very, like, you know, British patriotism or nationalism by any sorts. I mean, you never see, like, conservatives arguing, God save the Queen, it's a fascist regime.
Yeah.
But I wasn't around for this kind of music, so is it sort of ironic or not?
Well, he's saying God save the Queen, like, ironically, yes, but he's very much against the kind of royal family. But at the same time, you know, they had, on the album that this was released on, they had the Union flag as the cover, and there's lots of iconography of kind of the Union flag everywhere. And it isn't necessarily a rejection of Britishness, but it's more kind of left-wing. They also had a song called Anarchy in the UK as well. So you kind of get that it's just subversive sort of stuff. So he goes on to criticise leftist iconoclasm and things like sabotaging the statue of Winston Churchill. So you can see that he's not necessarily against British values per se. It's more about he's kind of typically left-wing, I would say, and he blamed social media on the whole, which is, you know, the go-to thing for particularly some of the older people. They're like, oh, it's all social media, we never had this back in our day.
I mean, he's not entirely wrong though. Like, the way social media works, I mean, particularly Twitter, is a heavy incentive for the woke types. I mean, the fact that you can cancel someone online over something they've said on Twitter, and the fact that you get the mobs in that way. I don't think you could do that as effective back in the, you know, before the internet.
But I have seen some research that suggests the opposite, that actually being exposed to people's opposing views can make you more polarised rather than less. And in living in these echo chambers, it actually has the opposite effect to what people might think. So it may be less clear than we might actually believe. But, I mean, it's still kind of, the jury's out there. But nevertheless, he says, these people aren't really genuinely disenfranchised at all, which is pretty much what you said a second ago. They just view themselves as special. It's selfishness, and in that respect, it's divisive and can only lead to trouble. I can't believe that TV stations give some of these lunatics the space. And would you be able to pull up that picture I have there? Because there he is, back in the day, calling these people lunatics. And I mean, if this is the guy who's calling you out as a lunatic when he was wearing bin bags on stage, calling for anarchy and looking like that, then...
I mean, totally true, but it's the point you were getting at, which is like he comes at like his songs and his way of saying his songs attacking Britain. It's more along the lines of kind of like old left wing thought. Like whenever you talk to left wingers, they're like, yeah, a real patriot is the type who criticizes their country because I want to improve it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've never been able to buy this because the individuals you interact with on the left these days, at least. Totally false. No way do you want to improve Britain. You want to destroy Britain. I mean, you openly say it at times that all of our values are fascist and blah 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 blah. It's unbelievable. But I imagine maybe back in the day that was the case, and now he's looking at them, and they're the types who do want to destroy everything. I mean, why is he defending the statue of Winston Churchill, for example?
Yeah, I don't really see any other alternative, but then I suppose he is the man who fought against the mid-century Germans, so you can kind of see...
It's a great phrase. The mid-century Germans.
I've stole it off of Academic Agent. It's just a way of avoiding the YouTube censors, because if you say the name, then it gets...
The N-word.
Not that one.
Well, it begins with Nazi. So,
anyway. You pretty much said it there. But the final quote here, he says, is, where is this moral majority nonsense coming from when they're basically the ones doing all the wrong for being so bloody judgmental and vicious against anybody that doesn't go with the current popular opinion? It's just horrible, horribly contemptuous, spoilt children coming out of colleges and universities with total S for brains. I mean, fair enough.
Yeah,
I don't disagree.
So he's like the third musician here that's big time coming out against this.
Yeah, and just to go to some of the stuff in the past, he actually defended Donald Trump as well.
Based.
And he says, what I dislike about the left-wing media in America is that they're trying to smear the bloke as racist, and that's completely not true. There's many, many problems with him as a human being, but he's not that. There might just be a chance that something good will come out of the situation because he terrifies politicians. So he's kind of conventional, anti-establishment sort of person. And he says, Donald Trump is the archetypal anti-establishment character, dare I say, a possible friend. So maybe not a typical left-winger there, if he's calling...
Well, no, I mean, he's totally right there, though. I mean, if you're a left-wing punk rocker from the old times, I mean, who would you expect them to side with? An outsider like Donald Trump, who's a businessman who's coming in and is clearly not giving a toss about the rules, or Joe Biden, who's been there for God knows how many decades.
This was back in 2017, I think. Or
I understand, but I mean, like
ago.
the purpose of... I mean, Hillary Clinton, very much the same.
Same candidate, different person.
Who would you back? I mean, you've got to back the guy who's going to cause some disruptions. I mean, sure, he might say some things you don't like, but who gives a toss? I
imagine him being a bit of an old-school punk as well. He likes the idea that Donald Trump's going in there saying stuff that offends the people with the kind of stiff upper lip, like the people who want to be all prim and proper, and he's going in there making them all upset. I got to imagine that him getting under their skin has got to make him like him a lot more.
But it perfectly exposes, as I was saying, the point about them being essentially a manufactured product.
I mean,
why do all the punk rockers hate you? Why do all the actual rebels from the days actually hate you? Because you're not part of the you're not something that's emerged out of the ether. Like, you are something that's emerged out of the universities. Bit by bit, brainwashed by brainwashed each student. Something
I've noticed about just the people that present themselves as hippies nowadays is they're such posers, because I listen to a lot of late 60s. I haven't
heard that term in a while.
I listen to a lot of late 60s music that's kind of that kind of cultural kind of shift, and most of them I talked to them about it. They've got the parachute pants and the kind of horrible patchwork jackets and stuff like that. Like, they've got the full get-up. I'm talking to them about this music from the late 60s that I really like, and they've not heard of any of it. And they're like, well, I kind of just like the DJ stuff. And then they're coming out with this really basic, modern milquetoast version. They don't even know about it. They're just pretending to look like they know something. But that's just my own personal bias.
I know nothing about music, so I don't even know what you're talking about. Sorry.
Okay, moving on to someone from a very different genre, although he is connected to the punk world, is Don Letts, who is a videographer for The Clash, who are another punk band, but he's also a reggae DJ. And he said that woke culture is a threat to protest songs, and he's saying that the best way to protest is through music a lot of the time, and in kind of making things political through music, you've got to kind of toe the line. He says, in a world so woke you can't make a joke, trying to navigate the minefield of fake news, conspiracy theories and information overload is even trickier by the fear of being accused of cultural appropriation. In my day, getting into music felt like a rebellious anti-establishment thing. Today, many see it as a way of becoming part of the establishment, which is very true. Especially a lot of the popular music now, all the fans of it just want to be big, they want to be famous, they want to make money, and that's all it's about. There's no artistry there anymore. But again, this is me being bitter at all the terrible music out there.
He's hitting on something there, which is the problem with the woke types as well. Dissent can't be tolerated, because the whole worldview is about power and power. And if you can't have, you can't have that with dissent. Dissent is antithetical. It is the problem with the system is people dissenting against wokeness, which is why they go after them in such venomous methods. But
yeah,
he's pointing out there that the if you want to be a protest group or actually rebellious, you've got to be the ones criticizing the system. But if you are the system, the woke types, every institution, every medium of conversation they even control, because they can control the language of the debate.
Yeah, you only need to look at who donated to Joe Biden and Black Lives Matter, and you'll realise that they're not at all apart from the system.
They're not outsiders.
Yeah, like you have Google and Facebook donating to Joe Biden. You also have loads of major companies advertising Black Lives Matter, donating to them.
Yeah. Well, donating to BLM, or they'll set up their own, in the HR institutions, have equity, inclusion, and diversity nonsense. We get sent endlessly people from pretty much every private company in the country, if not the world at this point in the West, that mandate that you must take inclusion and equity and diversity training and so on and so forth. And it's just chock-a-block for the woke intersectional nonsense.
I've covered lots of it in articles, actually, and we even, just to go back to something that I know you've mentioned on the podcast before, we even had it in the UK government, even though some of it has been kind of banned, and that was the kind of institutional racism training in one government department. So it even pervades when you fight against it, because, of course, Kemi banned unconscious bias training and diversity training, which surely this institutional racism training would come under the kind of umbrella term of diversity training, but it's just called something else, and therefore it kind of slipped through the cracks. But nevertheless, I'm going to move on to someone who is far more well known for their outspoken opinions, which is Morrissey from the Smiths.
So I wonder when we're going to get to Morrissey, because Morrissey's the famous one. So I don't know how many foreigners know, but Morrissey has become a bit of a pariah in the UK because he keeps backing For Britain, and For Britain have dangerous opinions about the fact that the country has been becoming more and more Islamic, and they don't like that because Britain isn't an Islamic country. Shock horror, what a strange criticism.
He's not wrong. It's funny because he's not really been damaged too much, because lots of people are still listening to his music that are very left-wing. I still listen to some of the Smiths stuff. I'm not a big fan of his solo stuff, but it's still good and kind of very different, kind of 1980s kind of alt-rock. But I know it's probably not up everyone else's street, but nevertheless, he's, as you said, been vocally kind of anti-Brexit, pro-Brexit and anti-immigration, getting around the wrong way. And he says, of this, the gates are flooded and anybody can have access to England and join in. You have to be sensible about everything in life. You can't say, everybody come into my house, sit on the bed, have what you like, do what you like. It wouldn't even work. So he's pretty happy to go against most of the people who probably listen to his music now. And of course, everyone knows him for his veganism and being very outspoken about that. I know that the Simpsons have parodied that before. I know in a kind of earlier episode they had him as this kind of vegan, kind of left-wing type. I think he was Lisa's imaginary friend, and then later on in a kind of previous episode, when he gained a bit more of this reputation, they have him on stage eating a burger, really fat, just like, I was a vegan, but then I found out veganism is foreign, and therefore I stopped doing it.
Based.
So yeah, you
so
can.
This is him before in the Simpsons episode.
You can see before, and then there's also the after where he's.
Should we go to the next link?
There he is.
Oh, good. Yeah.
But yeah, this is also a bit of a comment on the downfall of The Simpsons, because they've kind of gone very much down that woke route. I know
they've gone woke because they went corporate. I mean, that's the, if you want, I don't know how entwined you are with the Simpsons nerds, but like I watch a lot of videos of like commentators on The Simpsons as a brand and the seasons, and it's very much the consensus that essentially like the first, what is it, like I think it's like first dozen or first like 9 seasons or whatever, you get good stuff, and then you see the ratings collapse. And I mean, you look at it these days, it's just a corporate shell. I mean, there is nothing about it that's interesting.
Yeah, I've watched kind of up until like the first 14 seasons roughly, but then after that it did like just lose its touch, and I think there is also a part of it where it's kind of done everything and it kind of has to die off. And I think that although there is certainly the corporate side of it, it would have died off eventually anyway, just because of how long it had been going. But some more good stuff that Morrissey has said. In particular, this is outlined quite amusingly in a Guardian article, which is outlining all of the stuff he said in kind of like they're trying to shame him, but it just makes him look really based. And it made me like him even more. So in this article, they say, he's surrounded himself with fascist imagery, and to kind of provide the evidence for that, he wrapped himself in the Union Jack, which...
fascist imagery. I mean, the country that defeated fascism.
This is just typical Guardian stuff, really. And he said Sadiq Khan cannot talk properly. And he said even Tesco wouldn't employ Diane Abbott.
I mean, true.
Didn't she come into Parliament with 2 shoes that weren't matching? Got like numbers wrong.
I think she went to the polling booth and she took pictures with like supporters. I mean, all 3 of them, and she was wearing 2 shoes that were different, and also both of them were left-footed or something. It's like, what?
So left wing, she's got 2 left feet. And on Me Too, he's on the topic of Kevin Spacey abusing this 14-year-old boy that came out. He says, one wonders if the boy did not know what would happen when you're in somebody's bedroom. You have to be aware that where that can lead. That's kind of...
That's pretty...
Yeah, I know. I thought I'd include the iffy things just so...
Yeah, to be fair.
Yeah. And also, he says, on the victims of Harvey Weinstein, he says, they play along, afterwards they feel embarrassed or disliked. So he's basically saying that they kind of went along with it to forward their career, but then they got a bit embarrassed, and they're like, well, now we're going to come out and complain all at once.
I mean, I haven't seen too much of the Harvey Weinstein Me Too stuff, to be honest, because I never really paid attention to the whole thing, but...
it is pretty awful.
What is interesting that he's happy to just be open about his opinions on that stuff, though.
Yeah.
And as you point out, it's not just like one person. It's not just Morrissey. It's loads of people in the music industry coming out and saying stuff.
Mm-hmm. So another controversial figure, kind of to wrap things up, is Tom Araya of the band Slayer, which is an 80s metal band. He posted a picture in 2017 after Trump got elected, with Donald Trump doing like the devil horns in with the band from back in the 80s, which was just like a joke. And it does look quite funny, actually. But he complained that loads of his own fans kind of had a go at him for it, saying that, and he said, that's what America has become. It's become a bunch of people that, because they didn't get their way, they're mad. I showed a picture that I thought was funny. They can't even joke. They can't even laugh at themselves. They can't even have fun. And that's just amazing that it's come to that. We're a nation of crybabies. He's not wrong. He also went on to say that I thought it was funny because all of the rhetoric that Donald Trump is kind of espousing and how everybody hates him. I'm in Slayer, and being in Slayer, sometimes you have to do stuff just to pee people off, but that's not the word he used. And the last example I have here is of Winston Marshall from Mumford & Sons getting kicked out of his band, but I believe you've already covered this, and I don't like Mumford & Sons at all. I think they're really lame.
To be honest, I don't actually remember what happened.
Basically, he complimented Andy No's new book about Antifa.
Oh, yeah.
And then everyone, like, crucified him for it.
You've got to be kicked out. And then he deleted the tweet like a cuck, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, and he apologised, and he said he didn't know how problematic the book really was. So
problematic. Like if you read the book, Andy No's book, go and buy it. It's great. It's just Andy No putting down in black and white, the history of Antifa, especially in Portland, the United States, the terrorist attacks they've carried out, and then here's the reasons why. Here's their theory. Here's what they want for the world, and here's the tactics and the documents they give to their members. I mean, there's nothing there that harms anyone. All it is explaining this, what I'm going to call a terrorist group, to be quite frank.
Yeah, and they certainly are. And everyone who was against it presented it as this far-right person targeting these innocent left-wing protesters. And they're so innocent. They've been burning down cities in America for
at least 2 terrorist attacks. I mean, people who really didn't do nothing. I mean, it's ridiculous. Sorry. Anyway, I can hate people who defend Antifa.
They are so indefensible, aren't they? That it infuriates me that we can't just do what we did in the UK in 2005, just break them up overnight.
Yeah, we actually have a video about that on the Lotus Eaters YouTube channel, but I'll let people go check them out themselves. But back in 2005, the British Transport Police actually just raided them across the country and then charged them all with conspiracy to commit violent disorder. Great. Do it again.
If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.